Today we're making Biscochitos. Biscochitos are a shortbread style cookie from New Mexico flavored with cinnamon and anise. They are easy to make and absolutely melt in your mouth. So let's get baking. To make our Biscochitos, we will start with our fat. Traditionally, these are made with lard. You can definitely do that if you want to. They will be delicious and tender. But here I'm going with half butter and half shortening. So it's a stick of butter or 8 tablespoons. Likewise, 8 tablespoons of vegetable shortening. That works out to 113 grams of butter and 96 grams of shortening. And to that, we will add half a cup of granulated sugar. That's not a whole lot of sugar, but like other shortbread cookies, these aren't actually very sweet. We will be rolling them though in a mix of cinnamon and sugar at the end, so they will get a little more sweetness then. Speaking of cinnamon, we're adding half a teaspoon of cinnamon, half a teaspoon of salt, and we're adding ground anise as well. And there's a range you could use here. Use at least a teaspoon up to 3 teaspoons. Anise is what makes these cookies Biscochitos. Okay, it's what makes them what they are, but it is definitely in a sort of taste or smell. So if you're not sure you like it all that well, start with a little bit less. And if you can only find whole anise seeds, you can grind them in a coffee grinder, and a teaspoon of anise seeds, whole anise seeds, will work out to just a little bit less than a teaspoon once it's ground. All right, so that's going to go in as well. And we will mix this in our stand mixer, hand mixer, whatever works, on medium for about 3 minutes until it's light and fluffy, scraping down the bowl as we need to as we go along. Our butter, shortening, and sugar mixture is nice and light and fluffy. Give the bowl another scrape here. And then we're going to add 1 egg yolk and 1 teaspoon of vanilla and mix it again just until it's thoroughly incorporated. So 1 egg yolk and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Whoops, plenty of vanilla, there we go. And onto the mixer it goes. All right, I've mixed that until the egg yolk has just disappeared into the cookie dough. And now one more thing to go into this dough, and that is 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And we will add that kind of carefully. And then we will mix on low until it is just incorporated. Stop once or twice as needed to scrape down the bowl. And remember that this will, these are shortbread, so this is going to be a relatively dry dough. Don't worry about that. A little bit more mix. And as soon as it looks like it's holding together and you don't see any more unmixed flour in the bowl, you are done with the mixer. And what we will do is not worry if we've got a little flour on the counter, because we're going to put a little bit more flour on the counter, and we are going to roll this out until it's about 1/2 inch or so in thickness. We'll go for a rectangle, but it's really not that big a deal what shape we get because we're going to be chilling this and then cutting it anyhow. So put that aside. And you can see this is what our cookie dough looks like. It's crumbly a little bit, and that's okay. We will kind of work that with the spatula a little bit just to help it hold together, and maybe even get in there with the hands. All right, we want it to stay nice and tender, and that means we don't want to overmix it. So just get it until it holds together here. Clean off the hands as needed so that cookie dough doesn't stick to everything else. Sprinkle a little more flour on the top. Pull some of those crumbs in and just gently roll that out. And it's going to be fairly soft. That's okay. That's no big deal. All right, again, this doesn't have to be any kind of perfect shape. We're just going to roll until we get about a 1/2 inch of thickness. And then once we do, we will wrap it tightly in plastic or parchment and chill it for at least 1/2 hour, but up to a couple of days. You could even freeze this dough and further ahead and then bake it off when you're ready. All right, so we will keep rolling, just a little bit more, go for somewhat even. And then this piece of dough is going to get wrapped up and we will see it when it has done chilling. My cookie dough is chilled and I'm ready to bake. The oven is preheated to 350 degrees. I have a large cookie sheet lined and ready to go. And these aren't really gonna rise or spread much, so you don't need to worry about crowding that cookie sheet. You can probably get away with just the one, but totally up to you. You'd also, of course, don't have to bake them all at once. But anyhow, that's what we're going to do. And so all we have to do now is to cut them. You can use a knife, or I'm using my bench scraper because that'll help me scoop them up off of the counter. And we're not going for perfection, but basically we're going to make little diamonds. So I'm going to cut about 1 inch across. Again, no need to measure. These might be a little smaller than 1 inch, so that's okay. But I'm going to just cut diagonally across my dough. And once I make cuts all the way across in one direction, of course I'll go in the other and crosshatch those so we wind up with diamonds. You can do just squares, you can make other shapes if you want, but this works out well. And don't worry if some of the bits along the edges or in the corners wind up being really crumbly. Again, this is a shortbread type cookie and some of the edge bits are going to be crumbly. All right, so we're just gonna cut across again. And if you have any weird tiny cookies, that's okay. All goes down the same way. Don't worry about it. All right, so if you want, you can dock these, which means like poking a hole through them, just like you would with other kinds of shortbread. All right, totally up to you. And if you wind up with cookies like it looks like I'm doing, that might be a little on the small side, just adjust your baking time accordingly. So for cookies that are 1 inch by 1 inch, you will need about 15 minutes in the oven. Smaller cookies might take a little bit less time. And all we're looking for is for them to brown around the edges, and otherwise be nice and set, and that's really it. So I'm going to arrange the rest of these on my cookie sheet and slide those into that 350 degree oven. And while they bake, the other thing I will do is to put into a small bowl about 1/2 cup of sugar and 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and just stir that around, because when these come out of the oven, we want to be ready to toss them in cinnamon sugar. So we will see them when they're out of the oven. Once our cookies are fully baked and just barely browned at the edges, we'll let them cool for 5 minutes on the cookie sheet and then give them a roll through cinnamon sugar. So we have to be careful because they're still a little delicate, but we'll take just a few cookies at a time and gently toss them in that cinnamon sugar. And we want to do this while they're warm, otherwise it won't stick. And then just set them on a wire cooling rack to cool the rest of the way. And that is it. All that's left to do is to allow them to fully cool and then to give them a taste. We hope you give this a try and you check back every Friday at 4 o'clock for a new recipe.